Welcome to the press conference on the Policy Address 2025. This session will focus on the development of the Northern Metropolis and industry development. Hosting the press conference, we have the Financial Secretary, Mr. Paul Chan, the Deputy Financial Secretary, Mr. Michael Wong, and the Secretary for Development, Ms. Bernadette Lin. First, we'll let photographers to take some photos first. Okay, thank you. First, I'll invite the Financial Secretary to make some opening remarks. Friends of the members of the public and the media, good afternoon. The policy address delivered yesterday. The Chief Executive delivered the fourth policy address of this current government. The theme is the deepening reforms for our people, leveraging our strengths for a brighter future. Now, one focus is to promote economic development. The other is the industrial development. And then today we will focus on that. And of course, there's also the focus of the development of the Northern Metropolis. Today, we have Mr. Michael Wong and Ms. Bernadette Lin together with me here. Now, the Northern Metropolis is an important driving engine for our development. It is also an important base for strengthening our cooperation with Shenzhen and the Guangdong province. Now, before Mr. Bernadette Lin gives a PowerPoint presentation, I will first say a few words. Now, we need to strengthen the institution if we want to accelerate the development of the Northern Metropolis, as mentioned in the policy address. One is a reform of the top-level planning and governance. Now, there are already projects underway at the Northern Metropolis, and then industrial land will soon be available. So our major task in future is to bring in industries. And so we need to streamline various development process and ease and remove barriers and restrictions so we could bring in more businesses. And this is about top-level governance. The Chief Executive will chair the Committee on Development of the Northern Metropolis. There will be 3 working groups under the committee. One working group on devising development and operation models will be led by me, and then the Chief Secretary of Administration will lead the working group on planning and construction of the university town, and then Deputy Financial Secretary will lead the working group on planning and development. Now, my working group and the CS working group have to do with development, and then the DFS the working group will focus on development policies. That is to make sure that supporting facilities and land will be available in good time, so that there could be industrial anchoring soon. So the whole purpose is to accelerate development. Now, the Northern Metropolis covers 1/3 of the area of Hong Kong. There are 4 major zones with different themes, and then the whole development period straddles beyond 20 hours. That's why there will be a need for many different operation models. So we need to have phased development too to take forward the project. And then statutory and non-statutory bodies could be set up, for example, park companies. And then there could also be a public-private partnership, such as BOT. As for tendering approaches or financing options, there will be a lot of flexibility. So the working group on devising development and operation models led by me will adopt an innovative approach, and it will review the different development proposals for the different zones and land parcels, and the aim is to speed up development. And then there must, of course, be empowering legislation and administrative measures for us to take things forward. So there will be dedicated legislation for the development of Northern Metropolis, and then there will be a delegation mechanism to streamline processes. For example, we could then speed up the approval of plans or relaxing planning constraints, and then promoting the cross-boundary flow of elements and so on. And then There is also room for removing barriers and easing restrictions for administrative measures. For example, flexible land disposal, bringing in finance, capital, and talents, and so on. Another theme of this press conference is about industrial development. But we want to bring in different industries as linked to the northern metropolis. The government has made some achievements in bringing in enterprises, as you know, in bringing in strategic enterprises. Well, over the past few years, we have now brought in more than 80 major enterprises with investment value totaling more than $50 billion and creating 20,000 jobs. And then we will be bringing in more world-class medical companies with an investment of about $46 billion and the creation of about 9,000 jobs. Now, we want to promote the strategic development of industries and I&T industry. So there are various options such as co-investment, so for us to take forward joint ventures, and we want to bring in more businesses here. And as the chief executive said, in trawling for enterprises, we face keen competition, and then time is of essence. That's why we need to formulate preferential investment various policy packages, such as tax concession, land preferential treatment policies, and so on. And then we could then talk to different companies and offer tailor-made conditions that will bring them here. And so as these conditions will be tailor-made, and then we have to look at the individual circumstances of enterprises. For example, the amount of investment they bring to Hong Kong, the kind of technology they bring here, and then how they promote the development of the low stream and middle stream industries, and how they contribute to our industrial development, and so on. So we have to consider all factors. At the same time, we have to consider their contribution to the strategic development of the country and Hong Kong as a whole. Perhaps I'll stop here, and then Ms. Bernadette Lin will start the PowerPoint presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Financial Secretary. Now, as we are implementing the projects in Northern Metropolis and attracting enterprises, I will talk about what policies and measures we have. Before I start, I will tell you more about the current situation and our indicators for the next 5 and 10 years. As you can see on the PowerPoint slide, we have a table, and the first column, you can see the figures up till the end of 2025-26. Some of them have been completed, some of them are expected to be completed. As at the end of this financial year, we're going to resume this number of hectares of land. We are going to farm 120 hectares of land. We're going to complete so-and-so number of housing units. In Kutong North, Fanlin North, and Hong Shui Kiu, we're going to have housing units completed. In Hong Shui Kiu, we are going to make available economic floor space. In the next 5 years, we're going to have an additional number of housing units and economic floor space to be made available. That's on top of the figures that we have as at 2025-26. By then, we will have commenced the construction of new development areas such as Sentin Technopole. So you can see that the production of land will be growing exponentially in the coming 5 and 10 years. I will not repeat the numbers shown on the slide. In this policy address, it is said that we need a new framework to meet a rising demand. The Northern Metropolis Development Committee will be chaired by the Chief Executive. The 3 working groups under the committee will have their respective roles. They have to do with industries and how we should streamline procedures. The working groups led by the secretaries will look into what development and operation models we should adopt for industry parks, for example. In Hongshui-Kyu, we're going to have 23 hectares of land. Now it's been planned for logistics park. The Development Bureau is conducting a study on this 23 hectares of land. We're going to establish a industry park company for it. With land available, the industry park company can make use of the available resources to attract enterprises to establish presence there. We're going to submit our proposal to the working group chaired by the Chief Secretary for Administration. The industry park company will be a non-statutory entity. We hope that it can commence its work within this year. The second working group will focus on the construction of the uni town. We have 90 hectares of land in the uni town scattered across different locations. The 3 batches of land will be made available at different times. The working group will look into how the site should be assigned, how we should make use of the lands. All these can be taken forward in tandem with the construction progress. The third working group is the working group to be led by the Financial Secretary. This is to make sure that the construction and implementation projects are on schedule. For private projects, we have a system to make sure that various projects can be scrutinized in time. We will make use of legislative and administrative means to accelerate the Northern Metropolis development. Let me first talk about our dedicated piece of legislation for the Northern Metropolis. In the coming few months, within the government, we are going to carry out study, and in early 2026, we are going to conduct public consultation, and in mid-2026, the bill will be introduced into the Legislative Council. We strive to complete the legislative process within 2026. We have some ideas on the initial scope of the legislation. The legislation will empower the administration in setting up a statutory industry park company in the Northern Metropolis, and the government will be able, under the legislation, to provide channels for funding industrial park companies. Why do we need dedicated funding channels for industry park companies? Well, these companies have to make investment decisions. They process a large amount of business-sensitive information. We don't think that their decisions or their proposals should be publicly scrutinized through the Legislative Council. All in all, the legislation will be scrutinized by the Legislative Council, so the legislature will have a role to play. What we want to achieve by having this dedicated piece of legislation is to facilitate a cross-boundary flow of people, capital, data, along with other essential elements. We also want to speed up building plan approvals. Now we have a statutory timetable for building plan approval. We want to speed things up now. That's why we have to amend legislation to achieve our goal. Simplifying process for adjustment of planning controls. Let me elaborate. We do have the town planning ordinance. Under it, there are statutory procedures for us to streamline process and change development parameters. However, for new development areas with no population intake yet, we need to make certain adjustment. Let me give you an example. Now, some sites have been assigned as industry parks. But as you can see, in the existing outline zoning plans, say Santien Technopole, we allow the incorporation of talent accommodation. However, for Hong Shui Kiu outline zoning plan, we don't have a permitted use for talent accommodation or exhibition sites. We need to therefore simplify the process for adjustment of planning controls for us to change development parameters more easily. We also want to expedite land resumption compensation payment. We do have a set of statutory procedures set out in the ordinance that we have, but they are rather cumbersome. Now, I've finished talking about the legislation. Now let me talk about the administrative procedures. We are going to commence a land use review for Ngau Tau New Development Area. As for the remaining administrative procedures, they are to remove barriers and restrictions. Apart from accelerating the development of the Northern Metropolis, we want to encourage the private sector to participate in the development. We cannot rely on the government alone. We need to leverage on market forces. There is another merit to such an approach. As we can see that the construction industry is slowing down recently, we want to therefore encourage the construction industry to participate in the development of the Northern Metropolis. The first administrative measure that we have is large-scale land disposal. We have invited expressions of interest for 3 pilot zones. In the 4th quarter this year, we're going to roll out the first pilot zone for tendering, that is Hong Shui Kiu. We intend to adopt the 2-envelope approach. Because there is industrial sites within this pilot zone, that's why by making use of this 2-envelope approach, we can incorporate more elements. The second measure that we have is the phased development approach. That's what the mainland called 1.5 level development concept that will be applicable in new development areas. From the engagement phase to maturing of the area, it can span across some 10 years' time. For commercial or industrial sites, sometimes enterprises don't want to build permanent structures there at the initial stage because things may change. That's why the government will be taking the lead in identifying suitable commercial industrial sites to pilot low-density facilities. During the first 5 to 10 years' time, we're going to build low-rise, low-density buildings and facilities, such as exhibition facilities, convention centers, or simple offices for enterprises. The government will take the lead. After a certain period of time, we're going to put in place long-term planning. We want to make use of the site adjacent to the Hong Sui station as the pilot site for it. It's of 10 hectares. We are negotiating with the title owner on a in-situ land exchange arrangement. The third measure is pay for what you build approach.
First, let me tell you what the current arrangement is. Right now, we do not have pay for what you build arrangement. For the owners of private land, say, own land for industrial or commercial purposes, and they want to develop a site, then let's say the site is in Kowloon Bay. The plot ratio is 12. And then the landowner may say that given the current economic condition, he doesn't want to build to the maximum of a plot ratio of 12. He just wants to use only part of the plot ratio. But then under the current system, even if when we just negotiate premium with the landowner, even if the landowner won't build to the maximum plot ratio, the lands department will still charge for the premium for the full potential, development potential. And then the lands and the landowner may say that he just wants to build an office building, but then the lands department say that there could be both office and commercial uses because it will fetch a better price, and then the lands department will charge premium accordingly. So of course, then the negotiation will fail. And now with the pay for what you build pilot scheme, it won't just apply to the Northern Metropolis. For all industrial and commercial sites across the territory, the same pilot scheme may apply. For example, a developer has financial constraints. He doesn't want to build to the full maximum plot ratio, and he could negotiate with us on the actual floor area to be built and the actual use, and that is actually a good arrangement. Now, of course, we will impose certain conditions. Here you will see the conditions will include, for instance, you have to build at least to 60% of the maximum GFA, and then there cannot be any alienation of part of the site. Otherwise, it will be difficult to build more in future. And this arrangement will come into place in the first quarter of 2026, and it will apply to all industrial and commercial sites in Hong Kong. And next, there will be an arrangement specifically for the Northern Metropolis, because we're going to resume many sites in the Northern Metropolis, but then some landowners may want instead to have in situ land exchange. So instead of making the government pay for the resumed land, and then maybe we could just have an offset arrangement. Say in the next few years, the site that we set to resume, and then landowners could use this land as a form of capital. So we'll still work out the compensation amount, and that will be offset by the site that the same owner owns in the Northern Metropolis for in situ land exchange purpose, for instance. So we hope to implement the measure next year as soon as possible. And here, the next administrative measure is about more flexibility for government tenancies. Again, this arrangement will apply to all suitable sites with short-term tenancies. Right now, the longest fixed tenancy term is 7 years, but then many in the industries tell us it's actually difficult for them to make investment for a time span of just 7 years. and then of course they are just renting the site. They're not buying it. Otherwise, they will have to pay the premium. So if it's just tenancy, then some operators prefer to pay rent rather than to pay upfront for a site. So what we propose now is there could be extension up to 21 years for a tenancy. So why is it that we're not granting a tenancy for 21 years in one go? Well, you can imagine if you sign a tenancy with the tenant for 21 years, and then if halfway the tenant wants to terminate the tenancy, he will have to pay for that. But instead, we want a more flexible arrangement. So say there could be extension every 7 years. That means the tenant will have more flexibilities, and they will decide whether they want to renew the tenancy. But then at least there's certainty that if they want to renew the tenancy, the government will do so for up to a certain period. So after consulting the industry, we could then implement this policy in the first quarter next year. And then now in the approval process. Now, under the working group led by the Deputy Financial Secretary, there will be a task force. And it will be led by the Permanent Secretary for Development, Planning and Land. Say if there are private development projects, it could be land development or superstructure construction, and then the party concerned has to approach different departments. We hope that this coordination office will be able to monitor the progress, and if a certain deadline is reached, then the office could step in, maybe to speed up the approval process, and then we could then ask the departments to give, say, specific comments on the proposal to speed up things. Now, our town land use review. Now, there are many NDAs being proposed, but then we find there's another site with potential for NDA development, because in future there will be the Altau station in the Northern Link. There are now 16 hectares of site reserved for public housing originally. Now, and actually the planning process has been completed. But actually this is a site next to a railway station, so there is a good transport link. Then, so there could be not just a public housing, but also private housing, community facilities, and so on. So that's why we're going to consider a new development area for an area of 30 hectares. Now, the MTRCL will be building a railway station there, so therefore we are engaging the MTRCL to conduct the land study. I believe that will be more efficient. So I'd like to stop here and see if you have any questions.
Thank you, Secretary. Any questions from the media? If I may remind you all, please identify your media outlet before you put your questions, and please don't ask more than 2. As the theme today is industrial development in Northern Metropolis, if you have other questions, please leave them towards the end of the press conference. The journalist in white, please. Over this side. My apologies. Good afternoon, I'm from RTHK. Just now you talked about dedicated funding channels. Will the funding proposals will have to be scrutinized by the Legislative Council? What is the initial investment amount? Will the government be forking out the capital investment? How can we make sure that public money is used well and proper? Will there be profit sharing if there is any investment return? Second, the Secretary said that the government would devise preferential policy package. Can you give us some examples? Are we talking about tax incentives, provision of land as a form of capital participation? What preferential conditions are we going to have for developers? Well, interest rate cut has been seen today. What impact is it going to have on SMEs? Are you going to raise the GDP projection this year? Thank you. On the interest rate cut, I will answer it towards the end of my speech. Well, first of all, on the dedicated funding channel, it has to be approved by the Legislative Council. The funding proposal has to be scrutinized by the legislature. We have to be flexible, we have to be speedy. After we've obtained the funding, we're going to assign it to different industry park companies. And these companies will have this flexibility to make use of the funding. The companies have their own board of directors. I expect that there will be representatives from the industry and the general public in the board of directors of the industry park companies. This is how the companies can react quicker. In the science park, they are also tasked to attract enterprises and investment, and they do have their own mechanism of overseeing their policies and measures. As to how the funding is going to be allocated to different industrial parks, well, I believe that these industry park companies will publish annual reports, and the details can be seen therein. Second, on profit sharing. All these companies will be wholly owned by the government. So what they earn will go back to the administration. We try to be flexible. Take the airport authority as an example. When the airport makes a profit, they did share part of it to the government. But as they are developing the 3 runway systems, we allow them to retain their profits to develop the 3rd runway, the airport city, for example. So as to how the profit is going to be used by the industry park companies, it will depend on their capital needs and their development plan. On your second question regarding the preferential policy package, we want enterprises of scale to establish presence in the Northern Metropolis. We want them to bring in technology and companies from the up, mid, and downstream. At this stage, we don't have any concrete plans on what kind of tax incentives or capital support we're going to offer. We will make use of tools such as capital, land, and immigration policies. We try to be flexible as we are negotiating with potential enterprises that may take presence in the Northern Metropolis. We try to tailor-make our policies to their companies. The most important thing is the job opportunities they're going to create, whether they can bring along mid, up, and downstream companies along with them. Will a cluster effect be achieved, and whether the enterprise's positioning is aligned with our direction of development. How are these companies going to contribute to our economy? These are the factors that we consider. Next question, please. The journalist in orange, please. Good afternoon. I'm from Tsingtao. Regarding the dedicated funding channel of the Northern Metropolis, it does not have to go through Legislative Council. How much money is involved and how we make sure that the government will not tilt in favor of any parties. Thank you. In the course of attracting enterprises and investment, the industry park companies don't have to seek approvals from the Legislative Council. But regarding the initial injection of funding to the industrial park companies, we will try to seek approval from the Legislative Council. On the governance system and the publication of annual reports of the industry park companies, we'll make sure that they will happen. The general members of the public will know how much funding is injected into the companies, what enterprises are brought in by them, and if the industries is in alignment with our development goals. These are the information that will be made publicly available. At the same time, sensitive business information is involved. So we have to talk to individual enterprises separately. And during the course of negotiation, we need flexibility for the benefits of Hong Kong as a whole. So we don't have any concrete details yet. Thank you. Next question, please. The woman journalist in white, please.
Will the market be able to absorb the over 10 million square meters of the economic floor space expected to be available in the next 10 years according to the plan? And second, how will the dedicated legislation for managing the cross-boundary flow of people like goods, capital, to be implemented? Can you give more details? And additionally, what measures will be taken to protect the public privacy, like particularly about the sensitive information, the biological samples? And how will the government consider of settling government expenditures in renminbi, including the stamp duty be executed? And what impact could this have on the settlement system and also the status of the Hong Kong dollar? Thank you.
Wow, quite a number of questions. Let me see if I can remember them all. Number one, on the use of renminbi, right, in Hong Kong, right? Yeah, the last question. As you know, we are number one in terms of offshore renminbi center. The capital pool here is more than 1 trillion renminbi. And on the other hand, perhaps you would recognize globally, over the past few years, many countries and jurisdictions, in conducting their foreign trade, try to use their own currency instead of mainly relying on US dollar. So we can see there are obvious use cases for renminbi. Even for the Middle East, when they sold, oil to the mainland, they accept renminbi. So from our standpoint, the importance of renminbi in the international arena is on the increase. And this offshore pool of renminbi, they also need to have investment opportunities. They need to have tools to manage the exchange risk, the interest rate risk. And this is where Hong Kong can come into play. So one of our objectives, which has been spelled out also in the policy address, is developing Hong Kong as an international financial center with RMB, renminbi strength. So that is one. And in our case, some of the supplies Hong Kong need are from the mainland. So if we can use renminbi to pay, this is very natural. And for the government in the past few years, as you may have noticed, when we issue bonds, we have also issued some bonds denominated in renminbi. That is another source of funding. So it would be a combination of tools to enable us to do this. With regard to biosamples, there are very strict protocols established between Hong Kong and the mainland authorities. The purpose is to allow safe cross-border availability of this biosample for research, for clinical trial purposes, for drug development purposes. But this biosample won't go out the restricted region. This is with the support of the central authority. And this is very important to Hong Kong in terms of our vision to develop Hong Kong into a biotech center, and in particular in health science and drug development. Going back to your question about accountability, in terms of the money to be injected into the statutory body or companies established by us to run the different industry parks. There will be accountability in terms of, number one, when we first get the funding from LegCo. But understandably, the subsequent deployment of these funds, we would delegate to the park authority instead of every time going to the LegCo. This is for obvious administrative convenience consideration. But for things like annual report and others, the deployment of those funds will be made public. And this is, in a way, demonstrate the transparency and accountability of the park organization. Thank you.
好，下一條提問提一提各位傳媒朋友就。
Next question. Please limit yourself to 2 questions each. And if your question is not related to the Northern Metropolis or industry development, please leave them to the last. Next, at the far end, the gentleman in white, please. Hi, I'm from TVB. Under the DFS working group, there will be a dedicated project supervision office. And so if there is program delay, then it will intervene. So how will it intervene? And then on the fully funded companies by the government, would that be some sort of a share arrangement? Will it be mainly led by the government, or are there other approaches? And then is there no cap on how much money could be injected into these companies? So, or will you draw a line so companies can't keep coming back for more funds? On the dedicated project supervision office, I'll first ask the DFS to take the question. I think the focus is really on how we could speed up some of the strategic projects, and we want to remove restrictions and barriers. And we're actually doing that, but then with this dedicated office, then we could do it in a more rigorous and structured way. And then persons in charge will know where to approach, and they can come and tell us, okay, we're experiencing delay in the project, so we try to find out what causes the delay. Now, when we talk about the strategic projects of the Northern Metropolis, of course, all colleagues are working hard on them, but then sometimes it may have to do with policy priority. Perhaps a certain process has to be completed before another process can start. And so when there's need for me to intervene, perhaps the Permanent Secretary, Ms. Doris Low, well, he should probably be able to manage most of the issues, but then it's better that we have an office to deal with such issues, and then she could approach the relevant policy bureau or departments. And if it involves complicated issues covering more policy bureau, then Ms. Lin and I will intervene personally. So that's basically the concept. Now, on the park companies, definitely the government will take the lead on the direction of the industries. In other words, what should these park companies, what sort of industry these park companies should develop, that will have to be led by the government. So the key directions have to be decided by the government on attracting enterprises and capital and so on. But then, of course, we'll leave other issues to the park companies for flexibility purpose. Now, maybe if it's a shareholding arrangement, then the major shareholders will have more say. Now, apart from capital injection, there are other ways to make sure we will still have the say, even if we are not contributing the bulk of the capital. For example, we could sign a service contract. And that is, say we set up a company, and then there's a service agreement between the company and the government. And in the agreement, we will stipulate what the company can do and what it can't do, or when it has to come and seek the approval of the government, and so on. So this is not something new. We've been doing that in the past. And second point, now even if we have a shareholding arrangement, there could be different classes of shares. We may not be the majority shareholder, but then we may have a large voting right, or we may even have a veto right. That means, say, in certain cases, there must be agreement of the minority shareholder. So there are ways we could have our say. And then another issue, possibility is about the composition of the board, because decisions are made by the board of directors. And so who do we appoint to the board? Who do we send to the board? Or we could also stipulate that certain policies must first be given consent by the government before the decision can be made. For example, raising debts, how much debt can be raised, or if they want diversification of development, and then we have to see how much they're going to invest. So we need to give consent before they could proceed. So there are various ways through governance approaches we could make decisions, and the rules could be set by the board of on the board of directors, or there could even be a memorandum and article of the company. So this is nothing new. This is actually. So the SAR government needs to use the different tools and powers we have. And we don't always have to be the major shareholder before we can have a say. And we don't need to use our own capital, but we could make the most of market capital to achieve the objectives. That would be the best way. Next, at the far end, second last row, the reporter with long hair.
English. So, as announced in yesterday's policy address, there will be 3 working groups for the Northern Metropolis. So, maybe can the Financial Secretary and the Deputy Financial Secretary share some details on your respective groups, and perhaps detail some more on the setting up of the industry park companies, like the number, the funding, and the company members, and on the dedicated laws and administrative means. How can these help speed up development? And to Ms. Lin, can you explain a bit more on using a 2-envelope approach for tendering in the large-scale land disposable pilot in Hongshui Q? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Let me first invite Development Secretary to explain the 2-envelope system. Yeah.
Basically, when we say it is a 2-envelope system, we will have one envelope looking at the cash, actually the premium being offered by the bidder. And the other envelope is what we call the quality side of the envelope, the non-cash part. For a large-scale development that we have in mind, I would think that the quality part will probably focus on how quick that large-scale development can be delivered and the kind of industries being introduced into the industrial land. The details will be worked out because it will be a formal tender exercise. So when we roll out the tender before the end of the year, you will see the detailed terms there. Another parameter that we will have to consider for a two-envelope tender is the weighting, the kind of percentage weighting to be accorded to each of the two envelopes. And on present showing, our inclination is to give a higher weighting to the quality side of the envelope. But again, the details will be confirmed when the tender is rolled out.
Back to your question about how to utilize this, if I may call it, industrial park companies to help us expedite the development. If I may give you one example, if traditionally for the government in terms of taking forward this kind of projects, we will go to the legislature, apply for funding, and to do the land formation, and then go back to the legislature to apply for funding to do the superstructure, to do the transport infrastructure. If we are going to do this sequentially, naturally this will take more time. But if we can find a suitable company and trust all this work to them, then when they undertake the studies and when they go ahead to proceed with the foundation works, the land formation, the superstructure construction, there could be overlapping work to be done concurrently. So in a way, that would save us time. That is one example. As to the number of companies, Northern Metropolis is huge, and there are several different areas with different focus. So understandably, in order to achieve higher efficiency and also in terms of the span of control, probably one company won't be able to undertake such a mega projects. So there would be more than one companies. But how many companies and how they divide their responsibility, this is an evolving basis, an evolving process. So what we have in mind is that we need to get this start as soon as possible. So let's set up one of the park company first, get it going, and taking into consideration the progress on the various funds. Then we decide whether we to form another more or to park it with the existing one. So this is indeed very flexible. And also, as you may know, we very much look forward to public-private partnerships. If the company coming forward is a company with substantial financial resources and excellent track record and experience in the development of industrial park, then we will be more willing to entrust them with a bigger project. If the one who comes is not that kind of expertise, or if we have many others coming to us to asking for participation, then there may be a case to have more than one partner. So I would say that this would be an evolving process, and depending on the market interest as well as our implementation timetable. Yeah, thank you.
OK， 下一條提問近我。
Next question, please. The journalist in blue. Good afternoon, I'm from Now TV. On the pay-for-what-you-build approach, it is said that this is applicable to across the territory. Is the government concerned about income and revenue? And how much less revenue is the government going to have? Thank you. Regarding the pay-for-what-you-build approach, it means that depending on the project and building that the developer wants to build, we charge the relevant land premium. When we adopt such an approach, the developer will be able to estimate the actual cost they are going to incur. If not, say for example, for a piece of land with plot ratio of 5, and if that site is large, then the developer will have to pay land premium according to the plot ratio of 5. The initial capital pressure on the developer will be huge as a result. And if the developer think that the project is not profitable, they will not take part in the project. We're going to develop many industry parks in the northern metropolis. If we look at other places, they focus on facilities. The enterprises will bring in production and advanced technology. However, for talent accommodation, if we are to attract top-notch experts or scientists, we need different type of accommodation. Apart from multi-story buildings, we may also need townhouses for them. If we have different types of accommodation, that will make the northern metropolis more appealing. This will help us and help the enterprises attract top-notch talents. In the interest of time, we'll take 2 last questions.
Three more. Oh, 2 more questions. Near me, last row, the lady reporter there. I'm from AM 730. About the preferential policy packages. What kind of companies will have priority to enjoy the preferential treatment, and will there be any assessment later on? And then about the 1.5 development concept, are there any successful examples? Now the economic condition is not that good. Maybe it won't be as appealing to enterprises. And what sort of projects can be carried out in Hong Shui Kiu, for instance? I'll ask Ms. Lin to answer the question on the 1.5 level development concept. Now, from what I could remember, in the past decade or so, I don't think there is a model in the government that's in line with this 1.5 level development concept. So this is actually a new initiative. Why do I say that I'm not aware of such models in the past? Because we are now applying the model specifically to new development areas, NDAs, in particular the industrial sites in NDAs. Now, apart from the northern metropolis, when we talk about NDAs, they are also in Tung Chung. This is a concept within the Tung Chung development. But then in the past few years, most sites in Tung Chung are for residential use. So if it's for residential use, then it has nothing to do with the 1.5 level development concept, because then development will be completed in one go. Now, and in northern metropolis, now I'll take Hong Shui Kiu as an example. I say that there will be some commercial sites near the railway station Hong Shui Kiu, and that will be the first pilot site zone for us. Now, the Hong Shui Kiu station is expected to be commissioned in 2030. And then if we just do some straightforward site formation, well, the sites will be available in a year or so, but then the railway station is not yet ready, and then investors may think that if they want to move into permanent industrial or commercial facilities, and they're going to stay there for decades, while they may not be so interested. But what if we first put up the site for a 1.5 development? That means you could just put up some temporary structures, and so it will be, say, exhibition gallery or even indoor skating arena, for instance. because some has actually suggested that. So, and that will inject some vibrancy into the area, and that will help to promote development. Of course, we will need to make an agreement with the investor, and then say when the lease expires, then and then the government will say that now the station is about to be commissioned, so there will be permanent development here. And then what about the existing low-rise facilities? Do they want to stay? So we will still give them a chance to say that now we will turn these facilities into permanent ones, or they may say, no, I'm not going to continue with the facilities, and then a site could then be available for permanent development. So that's the idea. Now, we introduced the concept yesterday. In just a short space of a day or so, we've heard an enthusiastic response from the market, because they believe it is a pragmatic approach that's in line with the current economic condition. Now, on the preferential policy packages, who or which companies will benefit? Well, you might recall we want to promote INT development in Hong Kong, and we have set 4 types of industry. One is in artificial intelligence and data science, one is life and health science, and third is the new advanced manufacturing, new materials, and fourth is fintech. So, you know, of course, we've been working hard to bring in capital and businesses, and so far we've been more successful with life and health science companies and so on. But then the preferential policy packages won't just benefit them, and that's the first point. Secondly, will we keep assessing the effectiveness of the arrangement? Of course we'll do that. So if we offer them preferential treatment, well, they have to convince us they will bring certain technology. They have to convince us with the scale of the operation, how many people they're going to hire, how many jobs they could create, and so on. So they need to make certain commitments, and then we will regularly follow up on the progress. Last question. Now, some reporters asked about interest rate cut, so perhaps we'll have the last question on the National Metropolis. In the middle, the lady in green.
So about the Northern Metropolis, besides speeding up land grant arrangements, would you consider offering financial subsidies or other support to boost developers' confidence and motivations? And I have one more question about the offshore renminbi market in Hong Kong. As for exploring diversified channels for cross-boundary capital acquisition, what potential options are being studied? And do these options include the possibility of relaxing restrictions on Chinese mainland residents transferring their capital to Hong Kong to buy properties? And what's the significance of the new renminbi business facility? And what's the target scale for Hong Kong's offshore renminbi market under this new initiative? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. On financial subsidy, of course, as a tool, we won't rule it out. But I would invite your attention to the fact that indeed Hong Kong is very competitive and very attractive as a destination for investments. Recently, there are a lot of rankings. I think you are very familiar with them. Given the institutional strength that we have, the very friendly business environment, the excellent financial services, not just the International Financial Center. If you look at it, for startups coming from mainland or overseas, during startup stage, we have angel funds. Then we have venture capitalists, private equity. We have patient capital. They can issue bonds. They can go IPO. And our follow-on fundraising is twice the size of the IPO process. So I would say Hong Kong is able to offer a full range of funding options to those companies of different development stage coming to Hong Kong. In itself, this is an attraction. And more importantly, for tech companies, say, for example, if you are in the artificial intelligence sector, Then Hong Kong is where you can get the data from the mainland as well as international. And here you're part of China, but at the same time, international facing. No matter it is data, capital, talent, all here. So we must be confident in our own competitive strength. That is number one. Number two, in terms of offering different incentives for people to come, the way I see it is that we need to look at it from a competitive basis. Who am I competing with? I can offer terms matching those offered by my competitors. It's good enough because the other strength that we have, simple low tax regime and the others that I've mentioned, will give us competitive advantage over the others. So in terms of incentives to be offered, we do not need to be over generous because this is public money. I have to be very careful. But we need to be also competitive. That is the guiding principle I have. Then going back to the question about offshore renminbi, mainland people coming to Hong Kong to buy property or to do investment, we welcome them very much. In the process, that would make our market more vibrant. It is good for property market, good for financial market. But the amount of capital that they can bring over, we need to discuss with the related mainland authorities, because this is also from the country's standpoint, the outflow of capital. So we need to step back and take a more holistic view. On the one hand, we need to be as facilitative as possible. At the same time, this must be orderly and safe. That is the overall concept. 最後呢，如果我可以
Lastly, if I may go back to an earlier question about interest rate cut, or you would agree that given the current condition, interest rate cut would bode well for businesses, for those paying mortgage, and so on. It's positive news because the high interest rate condition has been around for some time, and now there's an interest rate cut. That means the interest rates are starting to come down. But of course, the pace and scale of the interest rate decline will depend on a number of factors. But then we all believe probably the interest rate will remain reasonable for some time. And if you're paying mortgage, you will get some breathing space. So it's good. And for businesses, they will also have less of an interest burden. It's also good for them. So we'll continue to monitor the external environment. Now, the Hong Kong dollar is linked to the US dollar. So when it comes to the interest rate movements, we're very much led by the US dollar movements. But at the same time, we don't always just align our interest rate with them. You can look at past records. You find that in the past, when they have interest rate hikes, we might not always follow suit, and we might not also increase the interest rate in the same way, because we have to consider the market situation in Hong Kong. And now the interest rate, there's interest rate cut, we're moving in the same broad direction, but then we have to look at various conditions on how much we cut the interest rate and how fast we do so. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming to the press conference. Just now, someone asked me about the economic growth for the coming year growth forecast. So sorry, I forgot to answer the question. Now, in the budget, I announced 2 to 3%. In the first half of the year, our performance has been rather good, in particular in terms of export, goods export and service export. and then also stock market's doing well, and there are more visitors coming to Hong Kong. So in the first half of the year, the GDP has grown by about 3%. And at this point, we have no intention to adjust the full year GDP growth forecast. We'll keep it to 2 to 3%. There are many reasons. Well, yes, there's interest rate cut, but then there are so many uncertain factors externally, and we have no sway over those factors. For example, trade tariff, what will happen next? And what about the protectionism of the U.S.? How far will it go? So that's why we need to be cautious. We'll keep it to about 2 to 3%. Thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. One reporter wants to ask about the Northern Metropolis. Okay, then we allow that question too.
I'm from Ming Pao. The policy address says that the government may adopt the direct land grant approach. So under what conditions or circumstances or mechanism will the direct land grant approach be adopted? Will the Executive Council and the policy bureaus have a role to play? How will we make sure that there is sufficient transparency in terms of price and conditions? Thank you. I will ask the Secretary for Development to take the question first. Thank you. When we grant land directly to a certain enterprise, well, this is not something new. As you all know, we have sites of different land uses, some for universities, some for certain industries. With the support of the policy bureaus, the Executive Council, the Chief Executive in Council, will decide on whether land will be directly granted to a certain enterprise. And through the company's registry, we will know that such decisions been made by the government. We have many pieces of industrial lands in the Northern Metropolis. That's why we want to be flexible. We want to be able to make use of this direct land grant approach. We look at the edge and advantages of the enterprises, the economic benefits that is going to be generated, and whether the enterprise can play a leading role in the development of the Northern Metropolis before we grant any land directly to them. Paragraphs 57 to 58, this approach is mentioned, and it's not particular to the Northern Metropolis. It applies across the territory. The Financial Secretary will devise a system to make recommendations. When a land grant proposal is submitted to me, it is usually supported by a policy bureau. And the policy bureau will remind me what factors I should pay special attention to in the proposals. When I make approvals, I do so in the scope of delegation that I'm empowered. Thank you. That's the end of the press conference.